Have you ever just stopped and wondered how a little kid, a toddler, can master the super complex rules of grammar when most adults can't even order a coffee in a new language? It's kind of wild, right? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the biggest revolutions in the history of cognitive science, a story that totally flipped our understanding of the human mind on its head. So, let's get right into it.
Yeah, this really is the central mystery, isn't it? It's a puzzle that had psychologists stumped for decades. Just think about it for a second. You've got this little kid, and they're surrounded by all this messy, incomplete, often grammatically incorrect speech from the adults around them. And yet somehow their brain manages to pull a perfect, complex system of rules out of all that chaos. How on earth is that even possible?
Okay, so to really get why this was such a seismic shift, we first got to look at the world it completely upended. Back in the middle of the 20th century, there was one single idea that pretty much dominated all of psychology, and that was behaviorism. So the leading voice of behaviorism was a guy named B.F. Skinner, and he argued that language, he called it verbal behavior, wasn't anything special. Not at all. It was just another skill you learn. The basic idea was that kids learn to talk in the exact same way a pigeon learns to peck a button for a food pellet, just simple imitation, reward, and correction.
So from this point of view, when a baby happens to babble mama and their mom gives them a big hug, bam, that's a reward. When a toddler says the word milk and they get milk, boom, that's reinforcement. You can see why this was so appealing. It's a really simple, elegant theory. And for a lot of people, it seemed like, okay, great, the problem of language is solved. But it had a massive, fatal flaw. Then, in 1959, this young linguist, Noam Chomsky, comes along and publishes this absolutely devastating critique of Skinner's theory. And his argument was so powerful, it didn't just poke holes in behaviorism. It was like a bombshell that helped launch the entire field of cognitive science as we know it today. Here's the crucial point, the thing that broke the whole behaviorist model. It couldn't explain creativity. You see, children don't just act like little parrots, repeating what they hear. They are constantly creating brand new sentences, things they have never ever heard an adult say before. So the big question is, how could they possibly do that if they were just mimicking? And this is where we find the smoking gun. Think about a little kid who says something like, "I goed to the store." Now yeah, that's a mistake, but it is a brilliant mistake. Why? Because no adult says goed, so the child cannot possibly be imitating anyone. What they're actually doing is they've subconsciously figured out a rule. Hey, to make something happen in the past, I add ed, and they're applying it. This is proof that there's an internal grammar engine at work, not just some simple tape recorder. So, if language wasn't something learned from the outside in, Chomsky proposed this totally radical alternative. What if the basic blueprint for language is already there, from the inside out? What if this thing that makes us most human is actually part of our biological inheritance, not something we invent?
You really have to appreciate what a monumental shift in thinking this was. We literally went from the blank slate model, where the mind is just an empty bucket at birth, to this new innate blueprint model. So in this new view, the brain doesn't learn language from scratch. It's more like it comes with a factory-installed operating system for language, and all our experiences as a baby just activate it.
And Chomsky gave names to the pieces of this blueprint. The core of it he called universal grammar, or UG for short. This is like the fundamental rule book that's shared by all human languages deep down. And then there's the language acquisition device, or the LAD. You can think of this as the specialized module in the brain that takes that universal rulebook and uses it to figure out the specific language the kid hears around them.
And look, this wasn't just a hunch. It was backed by some powerful logical arguments. Like the poverty of the stimulus, that just points out that the language kids actually hear is way too messy and full of errors to explain the perfect grammar they end up with. Or convergence, the fact that all kids in a community end up with the same grammar, which suggests they're all following the same internal plan. And, of course, this amazing ability is totally unique to humans. All these clues point in one direction. Language is an instinct.
But wait a minute, this raises a pretty huge question, right? If we all have the same universal grammar baked into our brains, then why on earth aren't we all speaking the same language? How does one single blueprint account for the thousands and thousands of different languages in the world?
Well, the answer is incredibly clever. Think of universal grammar not as a finished building, but more like a switchboard. All the main circuits, which Chomsky called the principles, are exactly the same for everyone. But there are also all these little switches, the parameters, that can be flipped either on or off. So a child's brain is basically just listening to the local language to figure out what the settings are.
For instance, okay, does the verb go before or after the object in this language? Click, the switch is set. It's a beautiful solution.
And Chomsky's theory hasn't just sat still for 60 years. It's constantly evolved, getting more powerful and refined. It started out by just trying to map out every single rule, but then it shifted to that much more elegant principles and parameters model. And today, the work is focused on something called the minimalist program, which tries to boil language down to its absolute simplest, most efficient design possible.
Now, Chomsky's revolution was absolutely profound, but it wasn't the final word. The debate about how we learn language is, if anything, more vibrant today than ever before. And it really all centers on one key question.
So the modern debate really pits two huge ideas against each other. You've got the nativist view, the inside-out process we've been talking about, where we have a special, pre-installed language module. But then there's the opposing emergentist view, which is more of an outside-in process. It suggests, hold on, maybe we don't need a special language part of the brain at all. Maybe all we have is a really powerful, general-purpose computer that's just so incredibly good at detecting patterns that linguistic rules just emerge from the data it hears. So in the end, we're left with this one profound question. Is the absolute miracle of a child learning a language the result of a unique biological gift, a specific instinct that's encoded in our genes? Or is it the crowning achievement of a massively powerful learning machine, the human brain, just doing what it does best? The answer is still being debated today, and it gets to the very heart of what it even means to be human.